The Empress Returns, by Iowa Forever. Chapter 1.21, Healing. Twilight woke with a start, giving a small yelp as she tightened her grip around her sheets. Sweat dripped from her body, and her breath came out in ragged gasp. Images of her dream still lingered, haunting her as she tried to reinforce that she was awake. The monsters could not hurt her, she was fine. Hollow words, only. The dreams would return in time. Why, she mumbled. It's over, why can't I just get back to normal? Twilight? Are you okay? Twilight snapped upright, turning quickly to survey her surroundings. She was in her library, Celestia's sun still high in the air, and standing at the top of her stairs was Spike, the young dragon looking quite concerned. Are you having bad dreams again? Spike? She stammered. It's you? Are you sure everything's okay? Spike started again. You seemed pretty upset, and he never got a chance to finish, for Twilight had leapt out of bed and pulled him into a tight hug, tears of joy streaming down her face. Oh Spike, it was horrible, she said. I had this awful dream that I was alone, surrounded by horrible monsters, and so much death. Whoa, Twilight, take it easy, Spike said. It's gone now, right? Maybe we could write to Princess Luna and she can clear up your dreams again. Maybe, but for now she pulled Spike tighter. Let's just spend some time together. No dreams, no monsters, just us. The silence was broken by a voice calling from down in the library. Spike, is Twee awake yet? Applejack? Twilight quickly broke away from Spike, giving a small apology before practically throwing herself over the banister. They were all there. Applejack, Rarity, Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, all of them were standing down in the main room, looking up at her. We didn't startle you, did we? Fluttershy asked. No, not at all. Twilight focused her energy and teleported her and Spike down to ground level, not hesitating for a moment before pulling them all into a tight hug. It feels like I haven't seen you guys in years. Oh dear, then these dreams really must be serious, Rarity said, squirming a little so she could get to a better hugging position. But it's okay now. I'm awake, I'm home, and I'm with my friends. Twilight gave a small sniffle. I really don't know what I would do without you all. Do you? A new voice asked. Twilight opened her eyes, giving a little gasp as she found her friends, her library, all of it gone. She was standing on a flat, violet disc, her only companion being a human at the opposite end. No, not a human, it was far too tall and thin to be a human. It was dressed in a checkered outfit, its face hidden behind a twisted clown mask. The only facial feature Twilight could see were a pair of long, pointed ears just behind the mask, hidden slightly behind a styled mane of red hair. Who are you? Twilight rose to her feet. Who are you, and what have you done with my friends? Do you truly know what you are capable of? What path lies before you? The figure asked, ignoring Twilight's questions. What are you willing to sacrifice for the true safety of your friends? Twilight would have answered, but found herself waking up once more. She was laying in a large room, beneath a ceiling that resembled two eagles flying towards each other. The air was thick with incense, the low hum of choral music barely drowning out the rumble of machinery outside. She was dressed in a thin white robe, a little heavier than a hospital gown but nothing that could withstand extended use, and she shivered as a draft hurried down the hall. Twilight was back in the Imperium of Man. And all the memories of before returned as well. She shuddered, rolling up to a seated position and pulling her knees into her chest. It all came back, Inquisitor Marcos, the orcs, all of it came as a rushing tide that Twilight could not drive from her mind. There was nothing, that compared to what she had seen. And the others that they would be so unaffected by one of their own friends being struck down. What in the name of Celestia was wrong with this place? Twilight's thoughts were broken by a shift from the foot of her bed. There was a pause before a sister of battle rose up from beneath, blinking a few times in surprise as she spotted Twilight. Lady Tara, forgive me, Sister Ruth said. I was praying for your speedy recovery. Oh, Twilight said after a moment, straightening out a bit. Thank you. Are you well? My sisters and I saw that you were in great distress during your psychic burnout, Lord Matthias called it. Ruth got back to her feet and cocked her head to one side. Is there any more that we can do? Any more? Twilight repeated the phrase. How? How what? I am not certain as to what you mean. How can you live like that? Twilight asked. The death, the loss, all of it. How can you keep moving forward like nothing of note has happened? Because that's only a small part of the reality that we have to face every day. Both Twilight and Ruth turned as Matthias strode into the room. The sisters, Alexis, And Nikolai, myself, we have all seen horrors and bloodshed that would make what you saw look like nothing more than a schoolyard scuffle. The universe is a harsh, uncaring realm, and the only way that any of us can survive is to become numb to what we have seen. A pause. I know it sounds harsh, but this is our reality. Twilight said nothing, turning away from the two and staring off into space as she processed what Matthias had said. Sister, may I have a moment alone with Tara? I will be waiting outside if you require my assistance. Ruth turned and left, mumbling a small prayer under her breath before she disappeared from view. There was a lengthy pause before Matthias sat down at the foot of Twilight's bed. Do you know how long you have been unconscious? Matthias asked. I don't know. Twilight shook her head. All I remember was Marco's and then I saw Veronica. Twilight looked to Matthias, panic rising. Veronica, is she all right? Sister Veronica was critically injured, but has recovered well. Matthias gave a small sigh. Tara, you've been unconscious for almost a week. Twilight's heart dropped down into her stomach, what little composure remaining shattering further. I couldn't have. Twilight mumbled. It feels so clear? Matthias finished. You would not be the first to think that way after a baptism of fire. But yes, you've been unconscious for a week, a bit extreme even for psychic blackout, but Sister Bianca and the Medicae are well versed in dealing with such matters. Twilight looked away again, trying to process all that she had just heard. A week. A week since she had been through hell, or at least a small bit of it. A week since she saw Marcos die, Veronica almost die, all her companions acting in cold detachment, and Princess Celestia, what of her? Princess, she mumbled, tears forming in her eyes again. You mentioned a princess just before you passed out, Matthias said. What of it? A noble on your home planet, perhaps? Twilight chewed her lip, trying to think of how best to respond. Someone close to you? It doesn't matter. A bad lie, but Twilight needed to move on. The Empress, what of her? Matthias' face seemed to fall slightly, but the moment passed. The Empress has won victory after victory against the Greenskins since arriving, he said. She is currently leading an attack against one of the major orc fortresses still on Caesarea. I've sent for Deathwatch kill teams to assist with the cleanup operations, but we are still looking at a few months of fighting and rebuilding before we can move to our next destination. Has she been here to see me? Twilight asked. There was a lengthy pause, Matthias giving a sigh. It's different than when you were a student, Tara, Matthias began. The Empress is a busy woman, and must stay focused on the war. She's made time before, Twilight snapped suddenly, turning to face Matthias. She's made time. I've always been there for her, and she's been there for me. Twilight turned away again, tears coming more freely. She's made time. There was another pause, Matthias watching in silence as Twilight wept. Surrounded by death and destruction, her only source of familiarity off indulging in that which had driven Twilight to this state. I understand you are still shaken by the events of the last week, Matthias said, rising to his feet before continuing. My squad and the sisters will be here if you need anyone to talk to. I have a few more duties to attend to once the Deathwatch arrive. Always duty, Twilight said. Everyone's always so focused on fighting and killing. Doesn't anyone here know how to be a regular human? I do not know what you mean by that. Matthias replied as he stepped from the room. In the sense you are familiar with, we may seem abnormal. But understand, this is the reality that humanity finds itself in. We must act in whatever manner keeps us from falling to despair and desperation. With that, Matthias was gone, leaving Twilight alone for several moments before Sister Ruth came back in. I do not eavesdrop, my lady, the sister said. But I could not help but overhear you shouting a bit. Is there anything more I can help you with? I don't know. Twilight turned away, drawing her legs back up again. I just feel alone, lost. None of us are ever truly alone, Ruth replied. We may feel lost, but the light of the Empress is always there for those who seek it. But Twilight cut herself off. Ruth was only trying to help. Arguing theology and divinity would not be beneficial for either of them. She instead thought of a different approach. I guess I wish she were here right now. There's a lot I feel I need to ask her about. I'm sure that will come in time. For now, though, perhaps prayer might work? A pause. I can help you if you'd like. Counseling with prayer was always something my sister superiors encouraged when I was in training, and while you are unspiritual it might help you get a better feeling of how to deal with such encounters. Twilight hesitated again. Celestia was not a god, or at least, did not indulge in claiming to be one. Prayer might have been a means to get her thoughts out of her mind, but to actually get Celestia's help seemed to be a bit of a stretch. But then the Imperium had sworn by it for 15,000 years, 5,000 without Celestia at all. surely there was something to the act that made it effective. The rational part of Twilight ruled against it, but the curious part of Twilight, the wounded and scared part of Twilight, that was more willing to try. Okay. Sister Ruth nodded and crossed to Twilight, kneeling before her and taking her hands. Twilight hesitated, feeling exposed as Ruth took her hands, but eventually reached some semblance of being relaxed. Most blessed and holy God Empress, Ruth said. We ask that you be with us in this place, to pass understanding and calm to those who are troubled. Listen now to your servant, O Master of humanity, and bless us with your power and majesty. Young Terra, your faithful servant and student, seeks guidance and comfort in her time of woe. We beseech you, O Empress, grant her the eyes to see through the lies of despair, that she might step back into your light and serve your Imperium fully. Twilight sat in silence, listening as Ruth said her prayer. Harsh as it was, there was an earnestness behind Ruth's words that made it feel possible. Ruth, does the Empress ever answer your prayers? Twilight asked. Ruth paused for a moment and looked up at Twilight. I would like to think that she does, Ruth replied. Though often not in ways I may understand, or even appreciate. The Empress is all-powerful and omnipresent in our lives, true enough, but we mortals must still act to see that any of her will is fully carried out. If we merely take the good and not the bad, we lose the part of her message that ultimately makes us stronger. But how do you know she's answered you? Judith would say that we pray for success in battle, and we've never lost or died, so she must answer us. Ruth rolled her eyes. Her irreverence can be baffling at times, but I suppose there is some method to her madness. But it is not just a matter of yes or no, but a complex analysis of the world around me, not just success in battle or the death of mankind's enemies. A pause. It might take time, but eventually you can find an answer. It did not make a whole lot of sense. In fact, it seemed a lot like blind faith grasping at whatever straws could be found. At least Pinky's sense had some observable phenomena behind it, rather than just assuming that it had happened and moving on. Celestia was still one person, and there was no way she could hear or respond to billions of prayers like a true god. What are you willing to sacrifice for the true safety of your friends? The words of her visitor came back to her mind. Was her old mindset, that of harmony and reason between people, what she was supposed to give up? Was she to embrace the rampant militarism of the Imperium and become but another weapon in its seemingly infinite arsenal? Would she be willing to sacrifice all that she was, just so she could understand and survive the Imperium? As she listened to Ruth praying, Twilight pondered. The last Vindicator fired, and the walls of the Orc fortress came crashing down. Already Celestia, her custodes, and almost a company's worth of Imperial Guard veterans and stormtroopers were charging towards the gap, Celestia using her powers to shield her compatriots from incoming fire. Armed with flamers, the guardsmen surged forward against the greenskins, even the most eager to fight falling to curtains of burning promethium. Inside the base, the Raven Guard had already struck against the inner gun emplacements, the young captain of the Astartes dueling a warboss near a knocked-out flak gun. Celestia turned her attention towards the center, where a big mech armed with an equally large gun was barking orders to orcs and grots in an attempt to rally his defenses. The Custodes moved forward, forming a golden wall between the orcs and the guard. The veterans moved into the gaps to strike back, high-powered lashbolts and flames striking the orcs as they slammed against the Custodes. Celestia kept her shield up, searching for a more opportune moment to unleash her power against the greenskins. The big mech readied his gun, light collecting around one of the many barrels strapped to it as the beast aimed towards Celestia. She redirected more of her power to the shield just as the orc fired, a brilliant beam of red streaking forward while the mech reeled back from the recoil. The laser exploded against the shield, Celestia's power holding but not enough to prevent a small cascade of miniature lightning bolts from raining down on the less well-armored guardsmen. Some deflected off the veterans' carapace armor, but others found only cloth and left screaming, burned victims in their wake. The orcs were getting crafty. Celestia's patience had worn even thinner. Advance forward and keep those orcs focused away from the guardsmen, Celestia said. I will deal with the leader. The Custodes did not say anything, raising their weapons and pressing back against the greenskins. The first rank of aliens faltered under the weight of their new assault, but the second gleefully crashed into the Golden Warriors, bellowing out their war cries even as they were cut down. The big mech turned his gun towards the melee, cackling as he charged up another shot at both Custodes and orcs alike. Celestia shifted her power, conjuring a fireball before releasing it towards the orc. The greenskin had already fired, the beam exploding among the fighters and striking down 3 Custodes along with a score of orcs, and did not have enough time to turn and deal with the onrushing psychic attack from Celestia. The flames washed over the mech and his companions, holding there for several seconds before dissipating, leaving behind small piles of charred bones. With that bastion of fire eliminated, the Custodes and Guard could advance much more rapidly, their momentum slowly building to a full rout as the orcs tried and failed to fight back against the humans. Empress. Celestia paused for a moment, turning to face the new arrival. To her surprise, Inquisitor Matthias and his entourage approached, the young man bowing low before continuing. My squad and I have come to lend whatever help we can in mopping up the orcs. I have also managed to secure 2 Deathwatch kill teams for further operations. They will arrive within a week or 2, if all goes well. Good, Celestia nodded. But I had assumed you would stay with the fleet, and with Terra. She has awoken, but still needs a little more time in the infirmary. As for staying with her, I do not believe she wishes to speak with me right now. She did, though, inquire about your actions and location. Celestia's spirits rose. Twilight was awake. It might have been simple magic overload, but the powers of the warp were never anything to take lightly. As for why she would remain silent for Matthias. I will speak with her, Celestia said. The battle is well in hand, and I shall only be away for a few minutes. As you wish, Empress, Matthias said. Though be warned, Terra seems quite distraught about what she has witnessed and might not be the most reasonable. You know her far better than I, so perhaps you might be able to reach her better than I could. Celestia made no further comment, merely striding past Matthias so she could focus her power once more before teleporting. Bridge, she said through her vox. I will be teleporting back to the ship. Make sure all preparations are ready for my arrival. There was a quick reply, Celestia not waiting long before she released her power. The air shimmered for a moment before Celestia found herself on the battleship's teleport pad, several more Custodes squadrons preparing to travel down to Caesarea while serfs and other crew members continue to prep and adjust whatever heavy machinery remained unattended. Celestia spoke to no one as she strode off the pad and down the hall, only giving the slightest of nods as those around her greeted her with bows or small whispers of praise. Her duties as Empress could wait a little longer. For now, she needed to be there for Twilight. The infirmary was further from the teleport pad than she would have liked. Precisely teleporting there could have worked, but if Twilight was still recovering it would have caused more distress than the young woman needed. Celestia walked in silence for several minutes, poring over what she would say once she came face to face with her student once more. Be calm and reassuring, as always, she thought. Twilight will be fine. Celestia approached the infirmary, noting sisters Naomi and Rebecca standing guard just outside. The 2 sororitas pulled themselves to attention as Celestia appeared. Empress, we are honored by your presence. Sister Naomi said. The honor is all mine, Celestia said, coming to a stop just outside the door. I heard that one of your sisters was injured as well. Sister Veronica, Naomi continued. She was struck by one of the greenskins during our operation to rescue Lady Terra. She is recovering quickly, though. I believe she and Sister Judith are with Terra now, Rebecca said. Poor girl, she was quite distraught about all that has happened. Even my offer of tea has not been too successful. Celestia frowned, but said nothing at first. She expected that Twilight's first encounter with battle would be frightening, but not to this extent. I will speak with her, Celestia said. Guard the door until I return. The 2 sisters nodded as Celestia stepped through the doorway. Judith and Veronica were on Twilight's right, the latter propped up on a rolling bed, speaking to Twilight about something Celestia could not make out at first. As she drew closer, the conversation became more clear. And with the prayers of her sisters and the might of the Emperor behind her, Celestine rose up and struck down the betrayer, rescuing Armageddon from the clutches of chaos once more. Sister Judith finished. I always loved hearing that story when I was in training. But how? Twilight asked. Celestine was dead, but then managed to come back to life on prayer alone? Prayer, and her own will to protect humanity, Veronica replied. Celestine was touched by the Emperor himself when she first died centuries ago, a small bit of his power intermingling with her soul. When threatened once more, her desire to survive and protect was more than enough to ignite that power and defy death itself. The prayer just added a little more strength to ensure Celestine survived the battle. And are you sure that's how it happened? Twilight asked. Did Celestine say anything about the encounter? Unfortunately, Celestine disappeared during the Battle of Terra. Judith looked crestfallen. What she saw on Armageddon is lost to us, only she and the Empress know how it truly happened. Judith glanced up, spotting Celestia and perking up almost instantly. Speak, and she will appear. Apologies, I did not mean to interrupt, Celestia said. I thank you for looking after Terra. It was our pleasure, Empress, Veronica said. Anything to assist the student of the Empress with her troubles. No doubt. Celestia nodded. If you would please, I would like to speak with Tara alone for a little while. Of course. Judith hopped to her feet and moved behind Veronica's bed. Come, Veronica. We must venture forth to new sights of this infirmary. I do not believe such a thing exists, Veronica mumbled, though Celestia could see the hint of a smile on the injured sister's lips. Then we shall create some. The Empress guides us on. And with that Judith began pushing Veronica away, moving at a slower pace so as not to disturb her sister further. Celestia waited until the two were out of earshot before turning her attention to Twilight, who had not turned to face her when Celestia had arrived. They seem like a fine group of sisters, Celestia said. Not unlike your friends back in Ponyville, no? Twilight did not answer, still staring off into space as Celestia's unease grew. Are you feeling better, Twilight? I understand that psychic backlash can be harrowing, but it has cleared now, yes? Still no answer, Celestia's face falling. Please, Twilight, it is okay to talk to me. Do you answer prayers? Twilight said, still not looking up. There was a pause as Celestia tried to come up with an answer, each one worse than the last. What brought up this line of thought? Celestia asked. That doesn't matter right now, Twilight replied. I just want to know the truth. Do you answer prayers? Celestia fell silent again. Her hand flexed for several moments before she spoke. I hear many, she said finally, lowering her head slightly. Due to the circumstances of my birth, I am far more attuned to the warp than almost any other psyker. As it is a well of souls, so those souls can call out and send messages through it. It was more pronounced during my 10,000 years on the Golden Throne, but I do hear them, Twilight. With my powers, I can even respond to a few of them. But do not think that makes me a god, in the sense that the people of the Imperium think. Celestia raised her head. If there is a true god, and there are times I almost convince myself there is, I am not it. If anything, I am certain that they would despise me for all that I have done. Twilight fell silent again, Celestia giving another sigh. Does that answer your question for you? If that's true, why do you keep going? Twilight asked. Why do you allow others to worship you like this? Why do you tolerate a society that so gleefully revels in violence and bloodshed? Twilight turned and looked to Celestia. I know it's selfish of me to ask this, but why didn't you help me? Twilight, Celestia stopped herself. I learned long ago that humans, for better or worse, must look up to something greater than themselves, of which religion is but one avenue. To deny them of that is to encourage them to crave it all the more, and thus invite chaos into their lives among other corruptions. Celestia looked away. I would love a chance to turn back the atrocities and madness that have engulfed the Imperium, but I do not think I am capable of that. Twilight said nothing, silence reigning between them for several minutes. But I am here now, and I see that my actions have caused you harm. Celestia looked to Twilight. I can send you back to Equestria now. But how will you get back? Twilight asked. Didn't you say you needed a conduit to return to Equestria? I will find a way, I always have. Celestia responded. It would be a simple process. Return to Equestria, tell Luna everything that transpired here. If all goes well, I should return to you soon, and you will be safe from the horrors of this world. No. Celestia blinked in surprise. Twilight, I am only trying to help you. And what about yourself? Twilight snapped. You expect me to just go home and be safe while you put your life on the line for these people, for Equestria as well? You said that humans have a desire to believe in something greater than themselves. Well, ponies believe in that too. Twilight got to her feet looking up at Celestia as she continued. I believe in you. I believe you are a kind, wise mare, who has only ever looked after her subjects. I believe in helping those that need help, of spreading the very ideals of friendship and trust that you told me to learn. Are you going to deny me that chance, the chance to try and fix something so horribly broken as this empire? Celestia worked her jaw for a moment, trying to find the right words to say. I'm not going back. Not until your mission is done and the Imperium is safe again. Silence returned, the two staring at one another patiently. It will only get worse, Celestia started. The battles here will only pale in comparison to what may await you. I know, Twilight replied. But I will overcome this. I have my friends, and I have you, don't I? More silence, and then Celestia sighed. If that is your wish, then I will not oppose it, Celestia said. But understand, I will not always be there to rescue you when the universe turns against you. I am still only one person, and even with all my power I cannot keep watch over everything. I know. But then, these people find power in communing with you, even if you don't always answer. Twilight let a small hint of a smile form, but it vanished soon after. Maybe there's a method to their madness. But Celestia stopped herself as a second voice drifted into her mind. It is a dangerous road you travel. To deny humanity a thing will only make them crave it all the more. And if you succeed in this grand vision of yours? What then? Damn you. Very well, Celestia said. I assume you will need a little more time to rest. Once you are ready, we will need to further your magical training. Twilight gave a short nod, settling back on her bed as Celestia made to leave. Twilight was walking a dangerous path, perhaps, but then, she was never one to just run away from danger. And Celestia had seen what happened when one remained ignorant of the dangers ahead. All she could do now was watch and wait. And, as silly as it seemed, pray. Chapter 1.22, Interview with an Empress. Twilight rolled out of bed with a groan. Another night of restless sleep, the dreams coming and going once more. Meditation helped, to a point, but time and again the dreams would return, plaguing her as she did her best to keep focused. She would ask Celestia, but besides their training sessions the Empress was busy with the mopping up actions on Caesarea and would not be there to answer all her questions. Twilight would have to look elsewhere for guidance, then. She got up and dressed, splashing a little water on her face from a nearby bottle that Sister Rebecca had provided. It did little to wake her, but at least she felt cleaner than she had in days. Instinctively she reached for her sword and armor, but then the memory of the battle returned. Her sword was broken, and her armor mattered little. Twilight started out, wandering off down the hall in search of someone to talk to. Matthias and his followers were back aboard the Sanguinium Martyrs coordinating some aspect of the cleanup operations she could not remember. Corax and Celestia were with the main force that left Naomi and the sisters. Good women though they were, trying to speak casually to them took quite a bit of effort that Twilight was uncertain she wanted to exert at this time. But then, perhaps exerting a little effort was what she needed now, more than ever. Twilight had guessed that they would be found within one of the battleship's training rooms. The nearest one was one floor directly beneath her room, reaching it would be of no real difficulty. The halls of the battleship were just as they always had been, but now Twilight found herself just as nervous as she had been on the Sanguinium Martyrs how long ago? It seemed like years had passed since she had first stepped onto that ship, years since she had been tossed into a nightmarish quagmire. Then again, maybe it had only been a few more months. What did time matter in the Imperium? Twilight pushed the thought aside as she reached the training room, stepping inside and pausing to take in what was before her. The sisters were there, with Ruth, Rebecca, and Judith kneeling before Naomi while Veronica stood off to one side, cleaning the squad's weapons. None of them appeared to have noticed Twilight entering, still focused on the tasks before them. And may you impart strength upon us as we prepare for our next mission. Let us not be servants of weakness, but march forth in strength and clarity of mind. Naomi bowed her head. There is only the Empress. And she is our shield and protector. The three finished, rising after a brief pause. Now, start your laps. We'll continue with sparring once you are finished. The three sisters nodded before breaking out on a jog around the training room, save for the section that Veronica was tending to. Twilight soon saw why, as Veronica finished off with one bolter before aiming it at a target on the opposite side of the room, firing 3 single shots before setting the weapon down. The barrel has warped slightly, Sister Naomi, she called. I will need to speak to an engineer to request replacements. Check the others before you make more requisitions, Veronica. Naomi called back. We'll resume target practice once you have fully healed. Veronica nodded, turning her attention to the next bolter in the line. Now, Twilight chose to make her presence known. Sister Naomi? The sister turned, blinking in surprise once she spotted Twilight. Lady Tara, forgive me for not noticing your entrance, Naomi said, giving a small bow of respect. I had thought you would be resting more. No, I needed to get out and move around again. Twilight shook her head. And you don't have to address me as Lady Tara. I'm just Tara, nothing more. If you say so, El Tara. Naomi's cheeks flushed, an odd sight on the normally stern sister superior. What brings you here? Your dreams? How did you? Twilight stopped herself. Yes. I haven't had a good night's sleep since that day. Everything just keeps going back to that day, seeing Marcos die and Sister Veronica injured. They will pass in time, Naomi said. With prayer and the guidance of others, you will recover in no time. Pardon me a moment. Naomi looked past Twilight before shouting. Faster, Rebecca. A sleeping Grox can move quicker than you. Keep up with Ruth or by the throne I will have you sprint the length of this battleship with Judith tied to your back, and she'll be the only one in armor. Twilight blinked several times before Naomi returned her focus. Apologies, training has only just begun. I want to make sure that my sisters are in perfect shape, and that we never allow what happened to you reoccur. Oh, thank you. Twilight watched as the three passed by again. Ruth kept a fast pace, barely showing any sign of fatigue as she made her laps. Rebecca did her best to keep up, but appeared to be having a rougher time with it as her breath came out almost raggedly, and Judith even under strain. There seemed little that could make that girl unhappy. Is this typical of normal training days? Twilight asked. For a warm-up, this is a little lighter than what they are used to. Naomi replied. We are not Astartes, who can endure stress that would kill a normal man, but I always try to push my girls a little harder than other sister superiors, to ensure that they are at their best. And what would that be? Much the same as you see now, except they're loaded down with about 1/4 tons worth of equipment. Twilight's eyes widened as Naomi continued. That is the upper limit of a sister in armor without additional stimulants. A space marine would laugh at such weights. I see. Twilight paused as a thought came into mind. Can you teach me? At this, Naomi raised an eyebrow. You want to train with us? Yes. Twilight nodded. Matthias training is fine, but I feel I need more. Not just physical training, but focus, emotional, even spiritual training, if I'm honest with myself. You and your sisters are far more versed in things like that, and I want to know more so I don't feel as vulnerable as I did then. There was a lengthy pause, Naomi looking Twilight over several times as if searching for doubt. It will not be easy, she started. I will make no concessions for you because you are the Empress student. I wouldn't have it any other way. Twilight replied, firming up her stance. If you wish to be trained by us, you will have to observe all of our training and customs. Naomi's eyes narrowed. That includes prayer, meditation, and possibly penance depending on your actions. You are still young in your faith, almost irreligious actually. Are you willing to accept that? Twilight hesitated for a brief moment, but finally came to a conclusion. I know what I need to do, she said. I know what I have seen, and will do what I can to keep moving. Another pause. Very well. Naomi firmed up her stance before speaking again. Consider this your honorary induction as an acolyte of the Order of our Martyred Lady. You may begin by joining the others in their jog. How long is that going? Twilight did not finish before Naomi's armored hand smacked against her cheek. Did I ask you to question me, acolyte? She shouted. Start running now. You will stop either when I say so or you go to join the Empress herself, and if you test my patience further I'll guarantee that latter shall be your fate. Now go. Twilight said nothing more, darting over to fall in line behind Ruth, Judith, and Rebecca. Fortunately, she could remember her perusal through jogging for the inactive back during the running of the leaves, so keeping a good pace would not be too difficult, she hoped. Whatever it took to get her mind back on track, no matter what pain it took to get there. Naomi's training allowed her to hide her emotions well, but it would be foolish to say she was not impressed by Tara's improvement. Yes, she was much slower and weedier than even her previous squadrons of sisters, but she could keep a steady pace and listen well to orders. She had good sense not to strain herself, even under Naomi's commands, and always seemed able to bounce back from whatever physical suffering she had endured. But by the throne, she was a terrible fighter. Tell me what you did wrong, Naomi asked, peering down at Tara as the younger woman struggled beneath Judith's boot. Well, I was thinking that, Tara started. Exactly. Thoughts are dangerous and distracting in a combat situation. You hesitated, and Judith was able to pin you. Had she been a chaos cultist you would be dead or worse before another sister could come to your aid. Now get up and do it again. Tara nodded, pushing herself back to her feet once Judith stepped away. Naomi backed up, watching as Tara once more tried and failed to break Judith's stance. The sister merely got her arms under Tara, yanked the girl off her feet, and then slammed her into the deck before pinning her once more. And now you have gone for overcommitting yourself. Do it again. Tara got up, taking a moment to catch her breath before taking another stance. She did not attack, though, as she and the others straightened to attention as someone stepped into the room. Battle Sister Naomi. Naomi turned, doing her best to maintain composure as she came face to face with one of the Empress custodes. The Empress has requested a private audience with you. You are to come and speak with her immediately. The Empress wished to speak with her? Why? Had she heard about Naomi's training and taken issue with it? At her command, my lord, Naomi said finally, turning back towards the others. Continue with your training until I return. Yes, sister. The others chorused, even Tara joining in. With that settled, Naomi approached the custodes, the golden-clad warrior turning and exiting the training room without another word. The narrow halls of the living quarters would give way to the sweeping caverns of the rest of the battleship, but Naomi's training was that she would keep her eyes forward, focused on the destination and the custodes that led her there. The rational side of Naomi, the one that had been long buried from decades of fighting and leading, produced only panic at what her goddess would want her for. The custodes led her across the main hall and up several more levels, Naomi sticking close so she did not lose sight in the general gloom of the battleship. Trekking across the vessel could take hours, days even, if one was not prepared, but the Empress Guardian knew his path well. Soon, Naomi found herself standing before a slightly more ornate door, two other custodes standing guard outside. "The Empress is waiting for you," the custodes that had led her there said. Naomi nodded her thanks and approached, the door swinging open for her as she stepped inside. "Ah, Sister Naomi, correct?" The Empress was seated at a finely crafted table, two steaming cups of tea set before her. She had shed her armor for a white dress uniform, her multicolored hair held back by a small tiara. "Please, sit. As you command, Empress." "Oh, there's no need to be so formal." The Empress chuckled. "Please, sit and relax. Would you care for some tea?" "Why yes, please." Naomi approached cautiously, gingerly sitting down in the chair offered as the Empress pushed her one of the cups. "I have taken to trying a more casual approach when speaking with my subjects," the Empress said, taking a sip from her own cup. "It is not for everyone, but some seem more receptive to the notion than others. Terra, for instance." Naomi hesitated, the tea sloshing slightly in her cup. "Is that why you have called me here?" At this, the Empress laughed. "Dear, there is no need to be so fearful," she said. "Do not think of me as solely an Empress. For now, I am just a woman concerned for the well-being of her student, of which you have sought to remedy." Naomi mulled over that, taking a small sip from her offered tea. It had a slightly nutty taste, different from the teas Veronica and Rebecca tended to and certainly more flavorful than Tana. "How is she doing?" "Well, to be perfectly honest, I am not certain if her chosen path is the best." Naomi set aside her tea before continuing. "I have been training her as I would one of my girls, but it has been rather rough for her. Terra understands the basics and mechanics of the training quite well, actually far better than I understand them at times, but it is the meaning and the spirit of what we do that she fails to understand." "You think she is ignorant?" "I think she is a naive young woman who is unable to fully grasp that more often than not the universe is twisted, cruel, and unforgiving. Terra's naivete is not always a weakness, though." The Empress took another drink. "There is a spark within her that allows her to reach out beyond mere understanding, helping to show others they are capable of far more than they realize." "That's..." Naomi stopped herself. I suppose I understand what you mean. She has connected well with the sisters. Judith and Ruth seem to like her the most," and Naomi paused, now realizing that she had left her helmet back in the training room. "The Bladed Lotus," the Empress said. "I had several encounters with their kind during the Great Crusade. A despicable lot, all of them." "Yes, but that sentiment has only gotten me so far," Naomi replied, reaching up and touching her scars. "Terra spoke to me on it when you were locked away in the throne room. That girl, to think that this Xenos mark means nothing concerning my purity? Does it?" Naomi hesitated again. Her training had taught her that the alien was the enemy, that all marked or produced by them were shunned if not destroyed. And yet Terra still thought her soul was beautiful. "It is a matter I have tried to come to terms with," Naomi sighed. "But I suppose Terra's influence has been better for me. I feel that she is one that I can speak plainly to on those matters, even more so than my sisters now or before." "I see." There was a pause. "I could heal the brand, if you would like. It would take a little time, but my knowledge should be enough to overcome the worst of the injury." Naomi still had enough composure not to choke on her tea. Heal the brand, after dozens of Medicae and Hospitalers had failed? Of course the Empress could do this, the most ancient and powerful human to have lived. A simple medical procedure would be no more trifling than swatting an insect. A chance to finally be free of the shame of wearing a Xenos brand, of constantly having to hide behind her helmet. Shame that, perhaps, she had projected solely on herself. She paused. "I thank you for considering my plight, Empress, truly, I do." She looked up at the Empress before continuing. "But I cannot accept such an offer at this time. It does not feel proper." "Does it now?" the Empress asked. "No." Naomi shook her head. "What happened to me all those years ago is something that I have not fully made my peace with, something that your student has helped me tremendously already. To take it away, to hide it from my mind, that does not seem like it would truly bring healing to me." There was another pause, the Empress regarding her quietly as they sat. Naomi could feel dread creeping over her as the realization that she had spurned a gift from the God Empress entered her. "Very well," the Empress said, taking a drink and smiling. "I thank you for being honest with yourself, as with me." "Oh, you are very welcome, Empress." Naomi relaxed slightly, turning her teacup in her hands. "I apologize if I was too curt in my rejection." You would hardly be the first to say no to me, Sister Naomi. The Empress looked off into space, her face dropping slightly. At times, I wonder what it would be like if more said no to my offerings, but that's another matter. The Empress looked back at Naomi and smiled again. Now, tell me what you have in store for young Terra. Rebecca watched as the young psyker shuffled into the training room, her head down even as the Hospitaller spoke soothing words to her. Had fate been kinder to her, she could have made for a strong young woman, perhaps even a sororitas, but to have her mind shattered so roughly. Imperial doctrine taught that psychers were to be feared, despised. Rebecca could only pity this one. The mare need not be led to calm waters, Angelique mumbled. Little lights, though, need further guidance. Is Angelique all right? Terra asked, quickly crossing to the little psyker. I have done my best to soothe her, Sister Bianca replied. But she is particularly disturbed by something. Unfortunately, I cannot get her to divulge what. The void rises around the ankles of the lion, and the raven follows the path of destruction. Angelique shied away again, shrinking back as Terra reached out for her. It's okay, Angelique, Terra whispered. Just let it all pass. Allow your magic to flow normally, and it will stabilize. The little mare, Angelique said. The little mare is like a teacher, stern but just. All the other little mares will flock to her in the twilight of a new day. I know that Terra's powers are direct from the Empress herself. Rebecca turned slightly to see Sister Ruth standing at her side. But I still find myself on edge when she discusses them, especially around that witch. We should be happy that she has been able to use her powers for good, Sister Ruth, Rebecca replied, turning to face her sister fully. And you were there when she used those powers on Caesarea. It was unlike anything I have ever experienced before. We have never battled or fought alongside psychers, though, Ruth countered. Who's to say that that was merely normal for her kind? Do you trust her? There was a lengthy pause, Ruth working her jaw with unease. Well, yes, of course, she said finally. She's the Empress student, after all, why would she not be trusted? I still cannot tell if you have fully embraced that thought, Ruth, Rebecca said. You are a good woman, but perhaps not all is to be approached with fear. Perhaps a little understanding is needed for such matters. Ruth opened her mouth to say something, but the words appeared to die in her throat. Rebecca turned back to Terra and Angelique, the little psyker now sobbing into Terra's shoulder. Rebecca did not get a chance to linger, though, for a golden-clad custodes had stepped into the room behind the three. Battle Sister Rebecca, the warrior said. The Empress requests your presence at this time. The Empress? Rebecca asked, shrinking back. Have I done something wrong? The Empress will explain everything. Rebecca swallowed, but said nothing more as she stepped around Terra and the others and followed after the custodes. Sister Naomi had not said a word about what the Empress had spoken to her about, though she had been rather shaken by the encounter. Was it a reprimand for allowing Terra to be attacked? Rebecca's journey led not to the Empress quarters, but down into the bowels of the battleship, where serfs and servitors labored to repair the machines and weapons of war that the Empress crusade demanded. Gingerly she sidestepped disassembled machinery, trying her best to keep the custodes in her sight. She was led to a larger room, and there stood the Empress inspecting something near a large forge. At least, she presumed it was the Empress. She was dressed in plain workman's pants and a light shirt, her bare arms and face glistening with sweat where they were not covered in soot. Her hair had been tied back into a single braid, all she needed to keep it out of the way of whatever it was she was doing. The Empress turned and spotted Rebecca, smiling. Ah, Sister Rebecca, she said. Apologies for my appearance, I had a project come into my mind and could not let it rest until I had started work. Oh, of course, Empress, Rebecca stammered, still unsure of what to make of the scene before her. I can return at a more opportune time, if you would like. No, this is actually much better than I had originally planned. The Empress wiped some of the soot off her brow. Please, walk with me. Rebecca hesitated again, but nodded before falling in step behind the Empress. May I ask where we are going? Rebecca asked. I am looking for some ceramite, the Empress said. Either that or adamantium. I am hoping to blend them with some other materials to make a durable but lightweight armor for my soldiers, perhaps cut back on some of the success. She gestured towards another forge, where several dozen serfs and engine seers were busy repairing armor for the Raven Guard. I had it in my mind to streamline power armor even further, the Empress said. Something light and compact, like what you sisters wear or even the Tau Empire's armor. It would be a means to make the Astartes even faster and more powerful than they already are. Unfortunately, those plans have been lost to time, she sighed before looking over to Rebecca. But enough on that, my friend. How have your travels been? Rebecca paused as she mulled over the question. They have been good, I suppose. She looked away from the Empress. It has been rather difficult in these last few days, what with my sister injured and Terra in her state of distress. We have done much, but it can be quite difficult to fully understand what she has on her mind. Really? The Empress asked. I had never thought Terra to be secretive like that. It is not secretive, Empress. Rebecca looked back. It is that she is so unlike anyone or anything we have encountered during our journeys. She is innocent, curious, even a bit stubborn at times, and her ideas about the world are almost laughably naive at a lot of times, really. I suppose our greatest problem is that we do not understand that, and are uncertain that she can truly understand us. I see. Here we are. They had arrived at a large scrap pile, where excess metal and pieces too broken to justify repairing would be melted down and reshaped into new armor and weapons. You can help me search if you would like. Oh, of course, Rebecca nodded, stepping towards the pile and pulling out a few broken pieces. How much metal do you require, Empress? Oh, perhaps a kilogram or two. The Empress inspected the pieces Rebecca had pulled out. These will not do, but it is a step in the right direction. Try to find anything with a slight weave in the metal. Yes, Empress. Rebecca tossed the pieces aside and began searching, the Empress moving to a different part of the scrap pile to search. She found small fragments of carapace armor, but moved on from them. Astartes and the more elite guard units would never allow their best armor to end up here, and the scraps they did throw away would be subpar by their exacting standards. Other than this lack of communication, the Empress said from around the scrap pile. Do you still feel connected to Terra? Connected is perhaps too strong of a word. Rebecca replied, inspecting a broken cybernetic implant before continuing. Since there is still quite a lot about her that we do not know, I do not think we can forge a true connection at this time, but I still try to reach out to her, when I can. How so? Oh, training, a bit of conversation, the odd chore here and there. I helped her with her research when we were en route to Caesarea, and I tended to her when she was suffering from her psychic blackout or whatever it was that Lord Matthias called. I see. The Empress pulled out a few bullet-riddled sheets. And Terra has been receptive to this approach. I like to think so, yes. Rebecca replied. Such a sweet girl. While it would probably be best that she lose her sense of ignorance, I do feel that she needs some semblance of her original life if she is to progress further in her training. The Empress merely nodded, tucking her collected materials under her arm before approaching Rebecca. I have no doubt you will help Terra in all ways, she said. Now, would you like to see what I am truly working on? Judith had answered her calling as she answered all others, quickly, and with glee. She hummed an old hymn to herself as she followed the Empress bodyguard further into the ship. She would have asked questions, but the Custodes were legendary for their silent communication, and what question could she ask such great warriors? Frivolous ones, perhaps, but then frivolity had its place in the world, even if it did not appear as such. Her journey brought her up to the bridge. The Empress was there, dressed in her immaculate white uniform, towering over all except her Custodes and Lord Corax. It was always an odd sight to see the Empress outside of her armor. The Empress, odd. Ha! There was something that Sister Ruth would find shocking about the goddess of mankind. Judith did not like to boast too much, but there were times when she enjoyed breaking down a bit more of Ruth's overzealous nature. You requested my presence, Empress? She asked, standing at attention as she reached the bottom of the stairs leading to the Empress position. Ah, Sister Judith, welcome. The Empress said before turning to Corax. Make sure that our reinforcements are adequately informed of the situation, and that they will be prepared to move to our next destination in 2 months. Yes, Empress. Corax turned and made to exit, giving Judith a look as he passed by. Judith said nothing, returning Corax's stare for as long as she could before she had to avert her eyes. Something the matter with Corax? The Empress asked. Of course not, my lady, Judith replied, snapping her head back around. He is wise, and Terra is quite fond of him. But he seems so aloof, sad at times. Have you spoken to him on it? Yes, but that is not a matter that is of concern right now. The Empress bade Judith join her before continuing. Our crusade has grown immensely in the last few months. Has it? Judith asked. I don't bother myself with such matters, I'm just a humble soldier, not a grand leader. 30 million guardsmen now serve under my direct command, and more shall arrive before we make haste to Ultramar. The Empress crossed her arms. The Raven Guard and the Imperial Fists have joined their forces here in full, and several more chapters of Astartes have arrived as well. It is not the greatest force I have commanded by far, but in time it shall grow. If you say so, my lady. There was a pause before the Empress turned slightly towards Judith. I have watched you, Sister Judith. Please, just Judith is fine, Judith said. Terra insists we call her Terra, and I do not wish for you to burden yourself further. Very well, Judith, the Empress gave a wry smile. I must say that you are quite unlike the other sisters of your squad. My superiors told me that too when I was training. Judith frowned. Usually when they were disciplining me for insubordination. Insubordination? They felt that I was too free in my worship of you, if that makes any sense, Judith shrugged before continuing. I was taught that we all worship you in our own way, within bounds of reason of course, and my parents always saw you as a stern father-mother. You understand what I am saying. I have had issues with some of those who would claim worship of me. At this, Judith's eyes widened. But they only do what they think will please you, she said. Judge them first by their desire and meaning before you judge their methods. I think Saint Sebastian said that. I believe it was another philosopher, but I suppose your sentiment does hold some weight. The Empress looked at Judith. You are quick to come to the aid of those that would challenge your own approach. And why shouldn't I? We all worship the same Empress, don't we? A pause. Well, theirs is a more serious Empress, one who judges on the slightest of mistakes and punishes them harshly. I never could subscribe to that theory. Just the stern mother? Yes, stern mother with really pretty hair. There was a pause before Judith giggled. Sorry, Empress, but it's something that I've thought of since you revealed yourself. It fits you much better than the old icons of you. At this, the Empress gave a short laugh. You are quite unlike the other sisters, she said. Perhaps unlike most people I have met in my long life. You possess far more joy than I would have thought possible for a woman of your age and experience. All with your help, Empress, Judith said, giving the Empress a smile. I have tried to spread that to Tara, but she is quite stern and a bit silly as well. You do not know the half of it. The poor girl worries about so much in trying to please me. There are times when she has made a fool of herself. The Empress looked back. But she means well, no doubt, and she is still learning in this regard. Well, I'll be sure to help her. Judith firmed up her stance. I swear on my life, Empress, that I will not rest until Tara is less stern in her dealings with you, so she can be the best student you have ever had. There was a pause, the Empress regarding Judith for several moments before looking away, smiling again. I am sure you will do wonderfully, she said. And I am sure Tara will appreciate the effort in more ways than you can possibly imagine. Veronica was no medicae, but all sororitas of the Order of Our Martyred Lady knew enough to dress minor injuries, in this case Tara's bruised shoulder from where Ruth had slammed her into the deck, again. There, that should hold you until the next training session, she said, ducking the excess bandages away. Tara moved her arm slightly, wincing briefly but not stopping as she checked for full range of motion. Thank you, Veronica, she said. I must say, you are holding up much better than most recruits I have trained with, Veronica said, setting her medical supplies aside for storage later. Even Ruth would be in more physical pain than you display. Believe me, getting smacked into a hard floor is just as bad as getting brained with a few flower pots. Veronica raised an eyebrow at this as Tara continued. There was a rather clumsy woman that lived in my town. A total sweetheart, but very prone to knocking things onto people's heads. Oh, I see. There was a pause before Veronica spoke again. Well, I suppose you should rest, there's always more training to do tomorrow. Of course there is, Tara said before regarding Veronica. How are you doing? Another pause. My scars still ache, I suppose, Veronica said, her hand resting on her stomach as she continued. The medicae do their work well, though, and I am lucky that I have recovered so quickly. She looked up to Tara and smiled. In a few days, perhaps it will be me that faces you in the sparring ring, not Sister Ruth. Just as long as you don't strain yourself, Tara replied. I'd hate for you to hurt yourself again. For you, my lady, I would die 1,000 times. This did not seem to encourage Tara, but she did make a show of accepting the pledge in the spirit in which it was given. She gave a quick nod and stepped back out into the hallway, pulling a jacket over herself so she could appear more presentable. Veronica gave a small sigh and turned back to her medical supplies, wrapping the bandages back up to store away. Did you mean what you said, that you would die for Tara? Veronica gave a small yelp as she spun around, choking on her words as she saw the Empress standing before her. Empress. She squeaked. I didn't know. I mean, yes, of course I would die for her. All of us would, I am sure. Your loyalty knows no bounds, my dear. The Empress said as she glided into Veronica's room, her uniform rippling ever so slightly. Oh, thank you, Veronica replied. Though, Ruth is the one with true loyalty, always the first to come to Tara's aid when the need calls for it, quickest to justify and interpret your commands or Sister Naomi's. And yet it was you who almost gave her life for Tara, not her. Well, yes I did. Veronica looked away. I do not see myself as a martyr, my lady. I am merely a soldier of your holy name, trying to save one more innocent even if it means I must give up my life. So then your sacrifice means nothing? To me? No. Veronica thought over her answer for a moment. Well, perhaps that is too harsh. Knowing that I spared one of my sisters, or Terra, that would partially justify my actions. But should they survive, they would be inspired to far greater feats than someone like me could dream of. That knowledge, I suppose, would make my potential death more meaningful. There was a pause before Veronica chuckled. Sorry, you must think I am idealistic or naive. On the contrary, some of the bravest, most noble men and women I have known gave their lives so that others would be inspired to take up their cause. The Empress looked away. Some do not heed the call, but that is to be expected. All species, be they Xenos or men, possess some cowards among them. You are more learned in such matters than I am, Empress. Veronica started. Did you wish to speak to Terra? She has gone back to her room to rest, but I am sure she would love an audience with you. In time, the Empress said, turning to face Veronica fully. Terra has quite a lot on her mind right now, and I am afraid that my presence might not be as comforting as you would believe. Oh, I would not say that, Veronica said. You are the Empress of mankind. Though Terra does not see you in the way that I or my sisters do, she does think highly of you and all you do. You should hear her sing your praises when my sisters and I speak to her after our training sessions. I believe she is scared, lost, but your light still serves as a beacon even to one such as her. There was a pause before Veronica realized she had been admonishing the Empress. Forgive me, my lady, but that was only what I observed. No, there is no sin in speaking against my own foibles. The Empress chuckled. I'd best be off. There are still matters of the crusade that must be dealt with. Oh, of course, Veronica bowed. By your leave, Empress. The Empress did not respond, merely stepping back out into the hall and vanishing like a specter of legend. Veronica peeked around the corner, but could find no sign of the Empress' presence. Except, perhaps, that her scars no longer ached as they had before. Ruth rocked on her feet, bringing her fists up into a guard position. Across from her, Terra sized her up, keeping a surprisingly open stance for one who had grown more accustomed to fighting. The other woman took a moment to wipe some sweat from her brow, flicking it away before resuming her original stance. Great Empress of mankind, grant me strength. Ruth lunged forward, aiming a punch squarely at Terra's head. The other girl sidestepped the strike, swatting Ruth's fist away with a smooth backhanded block. Ruth pulled back so as to avoid overstretching herself, slipping underneath Terra's counterattack with ease. Grant my body power to strike down the foes of your kingdom. Now Terra was on the attack, sweeping her leg out to try and trip Ruth. Ruth stepped back and punched, catching Terra in the shoulder with a glancing blow. Terra rolled with the punch, a marked improvement over her first day of training so long ago, before sweeping her arm up to seize Ruth before she could pull back. Let not my enemy triumph, for they do not know your light. Ruth twisted her arm, breaking free of Terra's grapple before jabbing an elbow into her chest. Terra coughed as the wind was driven from her lungs, but recovered quickly before Ruth could drop her to the ground. She blocked another strike, redirecting it upward before jabbing her free hand into Ruth's side. Let all perish before you, for yours is truth, power, hatred, and light. Ruth lunged forward, but Terra slipped under her attempted grapple and wrapped her arms around Ruth's waist. The sister had only a moment to react before Terra yanked upward, freeing her from the deck for the briefest of instances before both came crashing down on the deck. Ruth shifted her muscles to break free of the grapple, finally wrapping her arms around Terra's neck to pin her. There is only the Empress. She is our shield and protector. And that makes 3 for Ruth, Naomi said, stepping forward as Ruth released Terra and helped the girl back to her feet. I must say, you do well to match Ruth's strikes, Terra. Well, I just happened to notice she goes for a head strike before attempting a grapple, Terra replied. Once I got that down, I just needed to work on blocking it more efficiently. Is that so? Naomi asked, looking to Ruth. Are you becoming predictable, Sister Ruth? Ruth flushed, more from embarrassment than anger. I will do better, Sister Naomi, she said. In due time. No need to burn yourself out. Naomi looked to the other sparring pair of Judith and Rebecca. Rest, sisters. 10 minutes, and then we will switch partners again. Yes, Sister Naomi. The sisters chorused. Ruth took a few deep breaths and stretched out, watching a few drops of sweat drop to the floor. The girl's getting better, she thought. I should have dropped her much faster. Ruth? Ruth looked up at Terra, the girl having cocked her head to one side. I didn't upset you with the critique, did I? I have a friend who's a bit more sensitive when told she's predictable. Nothing you say can dishearten me, Lady Tara, Ruth said, wiping her brow before standing up. I have served the Empress faithfully for 25 years, and have been corrected countless times. What is one more critique, especially from one as illustrious as you? I can barely hold my own in a fight, especially not against you. Tara furrowed her brow. I'd hardly call that illustrious. Regardless. There was a pause, Ruth regarding Tara for a moment before she spoke again. Your psychic powers. It's okay, you can call it magic, Tara said. Psychic power seems to have some kind of stigma around here, and it might help you approach it a bit better, at least in regards to me. Oh, Ruth massaged her arm before continuing. Anyway, your powers do they offer physical enhancements? Well, yes. Tara started. I don't use my magic like that, though. It's a disservice to those that are more physically inclined like you. You see it as cheating? I guess you could think of it like that. Besides, I'm much better with teleports and shields than strength and speed enhancements. Ruth nodded as Tara continued. Why do you ask? You're usually more suspicious towards people with my powers. I was thinking, she started. I was thinking that, perhaps in the event that we come up against more enemies with psychic abilities, perhaps I could train against you when you are utilizing your powers? At this, Tara frowned. She started. But it's a bit dangerous, you could get hurt if you get hit by an errant blast or something. No, this is something that I must prepare for. Ruth firmed up her stance. No matter what it takes, I will do what I can to protect you from any attacks or powers. There was a lengthy pause, Tara still looking hesitant. Finally she allowed a smile. Well, I'll talk about it with Sister Naomi, Tara said. Ruth nodded, hoping to move on to another subject before another voice cut through the hall. Battle Sister Ruth, the custodess said. The Empress requests your immediate presence. Ruth's heart dropped into her stomach. A chance to speak with the Empress filled her with joy and dread. Especially dread. She swallowed and turned to face the golden-clad warrior. I am not presentable, my lord, she said. Dressed in training khakis and boots, covered in sweat, she would be an embarrassment in front of the Empress. The Empress requires your immediate presence, Battle Sister Ruth. The custodess said. Ruth swallowed again before looking to her sisters, then back to the custodess. Very well, she said, bowing her head as she fell in step behind the custodess. She did not bother looking up, keeping her focus on the heels of the golden-clad warrior. Anything to prepare herself for standing before the Empress, humble and quiet. That was the role she would play, Ruth the humble, Ruth the sinner, Ruth the sister that had tossed the Empress' personal student around like a sack of flour. Ruth was led to a darkened room. Once she was sure she was alone, she knelt with her hands clasped in front of her. Most Holy Empress, forgive me for my inattentiveness, she prayed. You call upon us to be prepared for your calling, and here I stand ill-dressed and lost in soul. Cleanse my soul, O Master of humanity, that I might be pleasing to your eyes. You already are pleasing, but not in ways that you might think, the Empress' bell-like voice echoed through the hall. I care not for physical pleasures, but only in the purity of mind and soul, purity of the heart. Ruth did not look up, listening as heavy footfalls crossed to her. Will you guard my lambs? Always, Empress, Ruth said quickly. You are the shining light of humanity, the guiding soul of all who are lost. I would march to the Eye of Terror for you. Will you feed my lost? Of course. I would sacrifice my armor, my flesh, everything so that all who seek your light would never be blind to it. Would you reject me? Ruth choked. Why would the Empress ever say something like that? Never. You gave me life when I would have perished. The teachings of your prophets gave me meaning, the words of your saints gave me direction. I would sacrifice my body and life for you, but I would never turn from your light. Even if I was not who I am assumed to be? Ruth could feel the Empress looking down on her, but dared not look up. Even if Tara as well is not who you think she is? No. You are truth, you are the light. There is nothing that would ever turn me from that. Ruth quivered slightly. Why was the Empress asking her to give up her faith? What was the meaning behind this blasphemy? Ruth gave a small gasp as she felt a soft hand cup her chin. Gently, the Empress lifted her head up, and Ruth could feel her tears flowing freely as she witnessed her majesty and beauty. She was dressed not in her armor, but in a beautiful white gown that would make even the greatest of highborn ladies weep with envy. Her hair twisted around her in some unseen wind, her entire body gleaming like the sun. Her eyes were soft, like a mother looking to comfort her child, and her smile was slight but sincere. Then go, she whispered. Go and serve, for your soul shall never break. Even as the powers of darkness lash against it, you shall never be far from light. Ruth wept, tears streaming down her face as the Empress smiled upon her. The Empress trusted her. She would not back down from that honor. Twilight no longer ached from her training. She was never unfit, but the sisters' training had toned her such that the woman looking back in the mirror barely resembled Twilight at all. Her body was marked with numerous scratches and small scars, her muscles far more defined than she thought possible. The scared newcomer was gone, replaced by a hardened fighter ready for anything that came at her. That was the hope, really. Twilight needed to see if that was true. She finished washing her face when there was a knock at her door. "Enter," she said, the door swinging open to reveal sisters Veronica and Rebecca, both dressed in their armor and carrying a white robe between them. "Tara," Veronica said. "Sister Naomi has concluded that you have completed your basic training and may be inducted as an honorary member of our order. We would need a canoness and several more years of training to make you a full sister," Rebecca said. "But there is no canoness, no time, and you are a special case." "Oh," Twilight said, massaging her arm for a moment. "Thank you." "There is one more thing," Veronica said. "A ceremony, when a sister fully pledges herself to the order and receives the symbol of her order. We're here to escort you to that ceremony. You need to wear this," Rebecca said, passing Twilight the robe. "Only this." Twilight hesitated. Not at the risk of exposing herself, that would be just like when she was back home in Ponyville. Rather, the battleship was nothing close to hospitable for that sort of thing. She could freeze before they led her to wherever it was they were conducting the ceremony. Starting to think like a full human, she thought. "It must happen, I suppose, just as long as I don't fully lose myself." "Okay." Twilight took the robe from the sisters, quickly changing out of her regular clothes while Veronica and Rebecca waited patiently. The cloth was a bit itchy, but Twilight put the thought out of mind as she rose to face the sisters. "Come now, young Tara, for the path to righteousness lays before you." Twilight fell in step behind Veronica, Rebecca following close behind. The hallways seemed darker than she remembered, but Twilight no longer feared such things as the dark. With her sisters at her side, and Celestia to guide her, she would never be lost. She was led to the training room, now darkened and thick with incense. Veronica and Rebecca fanned out, and Twilight could see Naomi standing before a makeshift altar, Judith and Ruth flanking her with what appeared to be short whips. "Welcome, sister," Naomi said. "Step forth and kneel at the altar of her most serene lady." Twilight stepped up, tugging at her robe to keep from tripping over it as she knelt before the altar. Naomi regarded her for a moment before continuing. "Sisters, we gather today to see the induction of Tara, student of the god Empress herself, into the annals of our order. Who today bears witness to this initiation? Sister Rebecca of the Order of Our Martyred Lady. Sister Veronica of the Order of Our Martyred Lady. And who stands ready to cleanse the initiate of her sin and shame? Sister Ruth of the Order of Our Martyred Lady. Sister Judith of the Order of Our Martyred Lady." Twilight did not look up, keeping her eyes focused at the ground as Naomi stepped forward. "Sister, you have met the necessary physical and spiritual sacrifices that is asked of all our sisters, yet one last test remains. Expose to us now all that lies within you." Twilight said nothing as Sister Naomi roughly yanked the robe from her body. "Understand that only through blood and sacrifice, either yours or the enemy, will you be fully cleansed," Naomi said. "I ask you, are you willing to lay down your life, body and soul, that the Empress' great plan may be achieved?" "I am." No sooner had Twilight finished saying this did Ruth strike her, the whip scraping across her back. Twilight tried not to flinch, but did wince slightly as she felt small rivers of blood dripping down her back. "Are you willing to destroy all that is unclean before her holy name, the mutant, the demon, the heretic, the alien?" Twilight hesitated again. She was not fully human, and they asked her to stand against aliens, her friends? No, she thought. Aliens like those that tried to kill Sister Veronica. Those, I can stand against. I am. Now it was Judith's turn to strike her. "Are you willing to give guidance and counseling to the lost, the weak-willed, so they may see the light as you do?" "I am." Another strike from Ruth. "Are you willing to die for your sisters, to understand that the bonds between you and the Empress, you and your superior, and you and your squad may be kept above all others?" "I am." Another strike from Judith. Twilight's back now ached, but she maintained her composure as the sisters closed in around her. "I find your soul set on the path to repentance," she said. "Now rise, and take the station of our office of sister." Twilight rose, her focus breaking slightly as something cold clasped around her leg. Metal, segment by segment it clasped around her, Veronica and Rebecca setting her legs while Ruth and Judith set her arms and torso. The injuries on her back stung slightly as the cool metal closed against it, but Twilight pushed the pain out of her mind as her chest plate and pauldrons were secure. Twilight allowed herself a small gasp as she looked down at herself. She was dressed in armor not unlike the sisters, except it was a light lavender set between gold lining. Her chest plate was dominated by an alicorn, its wing sweeping outward in flight, and her left shoulder was marked with a six-pointed star, her cutie mark. She could feel her magic reaching out and mixing with the mechanics that moved the armor, giving it an almost supernatural flow as she moved about. It's beautiful. Crafted by the Empress' own hand, Rebecca said. I helped her forge it. And there is another gift from Her Majesty. Naomi reached down behind the altar and produced a sword. It had the hilt and guard of Twilight's old sword, but it was now a silvered longsword that put even the beauties of her old weapon to shame. Twilight gasped again as she saw 5 familiar etchings set in the blade: an apple for honesty, a butterfly for kindness, a balloon for laughter, a gem for generosity, and a lightning bolt for loyalty, all terminating in an amethyst star set in the guard. You all knew about this? Twilight asked, taking the sword from Naomi. Not at first, no, Ruth said. The Empress had many questions for us, but once we had completed them she told us of her surprise. We may be your shield, Terra, but this weapon and armor will protect you from far more than we can possibly imagine. Twilight smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. Even if Celestia was not physically present, a part of her would always be there to guide her. A pause, Twilight's face dropping as she shifted around in her armor. Does it always chafe so much? Oh, Naomi's face dropped too, her undamaged cheek flushing red. There is an undersuit that should help you interface with the armor and be more comfortable. We'll find a spare one when we're finished here. Naomi was interrupted as a warning bell rang through the battleship. Perhaps a bit sooner than that, I'm afraid. Empress, the ship's astropath said. A fleet of ships is dropping out of warp drive, they will be within visual range soon. How is that possible? Celestia asked, striding up onto the bridge. How could this fleet hide themselves from our sight so easily? There is something interfering with my sensors, something massive. The astropath replied. Either an attack from the hive mind or something more sinister. Celestia turned to the captain of the ship. Are we at battle stations? She asked. Yes, and the fleet is arranging to defend against this attack, the captain replied. If it is the enemy coming to seek revenge, we shall send them screaming back to hell where they belong. Empress. We have visual on the fleet. Celestia looked out the nearest viewport, watching as real space twisted about as the new fleet emerged. Battle barges, strike cruisers, destroyers, hundreds of ships and escort craft pulling out of the warp, armed and ready for battle. But that was not what caught Celestia's eyes. What it was the massive distortion in real space behind them. It produced forth a great structure of stone and metal, surrounded by even more ships and bristling with heavy weapons. It was far out enough that it would not cause major disturbances to Caesarea's gravity, but its impact would be felt in other matters. The rock, Celestia said, firming up her stance. It appears that the Dark Angels have come to test my authority. End of chapter 1.22, Interview with an Empress.